E whiti e te iwi e, whiti te rea, whiti te wana, whiti ora ki te whaiau, ki te ao marama whāno, hara mai te tō kia haumi e, hui e, taiki e. This week on The Hui.
Our most pristine taonga is under threat.
Without doubt, the single most concerning issue we have is the ticking time bomb called the Niagara.
Is this an environmental disaster waiting to happen?
The wreck is collapsing at quite a fast rate.
Plus, we meet the waka world champion, Casey Ngataki.
That's good paddling. Beautiful.
Who has switched sports to pursue an Olympic dream.
Right now, just taking it one day at a time, and I know there'll be a lot of ups and downs.
Ka tokia taku kiri ki te anu o te mātau, he aroha ko mai ngone ki te hunga, koe rere ki te pō. Huri tū mai kia tātou kei te maramati he wa mauri ora, and welcome back to The Hui. It's a potential ticking time bomb in the Hauraki Gulf, a shipwreck rusting away for over 80 years that could hold thousands of tonnes of oil. And there are fears, if released, it would destroy the already fragile ecosystem. After requests from the previous government to intervene fell on deaf ears, iwi are calling once more for an investigation of the wreckage. Mea nei te purongo, Ameliana Johnson.
Sandspit Marina, an hour north of Auckland. A repurposed police boat gets ready for a day of patrolling the Hauraki Gulf. Owned and operated by local iwi Ngāti Manuhiri.
Although Hauraki Gulf is commonly known as the seabird capital of the world, a lot of our seabirds are fighting for kai. There's a lot of starvation, a lot of pollution in the water as well. Alex Rogers.
Chief Executive Nicola McDonald is working hard to change that. But troubled waters are ahead. Because what lies beneath is a potential environmental disaster.
Without doubt, one of the biggest single most concerning issues we have is the ticking time bomb called the Niagara.
The RMS Niagara launched in 1912. Dubbed Queen of the Pacific, the passenger liner regularly travelled between Aotearoa and Vancouver. 19th of June, 1940. The world has been at war for almost a year, and the Pacific is an arena for battle.
At that time, the Navy is warning the government that there was no way to prevent enemy ships laying mines in New Zealand waters. How complacent New Zealand was in June of 1940. We were sitting here completely vulnerable.
Oblivious to this, passengers settled in on board, their loved ones farewelling them from shore as they set off for their first destination, Suva.
Early in the morning, Niagara left Auckland with 136 passengers and 200 crew. She would have filled her bunkers in Auckland before she left, so she was carrying a full load of fuel oil. She was sailing in the Gulf when she struck a mine. It took essentially 30 minutes or so for her to sink. It was pretty quick, but there was enough time for the passengers and crew to be able to abandon ship.
What no one knew was that a German ship had slipped undetected into New Zealand waters.
A very large ship was able to spend 7 hours laying mines and was essentially able to get away with it.
The Niagara sank to the bottom of the sea, along with those bunkers of fuel oil.
It is a high-risk wreck.
The wreckage lies 40 kilometres southeast of Whangarei. This footage of Niagara was taken in March this year. The wreckage is 120 metres deep and has been underwater for over 80 years now.
The wreck is collapsing at quite a fast rate.
Keith Gordon has spent decades diving and studying the Niagara wreckage.
A lot of features that used to be there are now gone or have just collapsed. It's not just corrosion, it's been biologically imploding. People don't realise, but bacteria are eating away every day at the iron. As it gets older, oil that is trapped under some of the wreckage, that gets released.
Late last year, Keith went out with a crew to the site.
You could see this area of a bright sheen and you could smell it, seeing this oil coming in and the strong, pungent smell.
Just pulled this in, it's come up with a big blob of oil on it.
You know, we've been out there before and we have seen oil slicks from the wreck up to 14 kilometres long. We've got a lot of maritime reserves out there and they do a lot of damage to our marine reserves.
Goat Island Marine Reserve is a protected area in the Hauraki Gulf. Ngāti Manuhiri are doing underwater surveillance work.
We drop down the rows, which are underwater cameras, to check the sea floors, check to see how marine habitats are working.
They are monitoring the health of this ecosystem, which is home to a thriving population of tamure, snapper, a staple in the Pātaka kai.
Every type of kai that you can think of, we have it here. If the Niagara was to breach its hulls, they will be wiped out. Nothing can survive. No biodiversity will survive ingesting crude oil.
There are fears it could be another disaster like the Rena, where a container ship ran aground in Tauranga in 2011.
This is going to be worse than the Rena. We're looking at something that like what happened in the Gulf of Mexico. Our entire ecosystem will be wiped out before our very eyes.
Just to clean up that 350 tonnes from the Rena, if it's correct, that figure I saw that over 40 million, just to do a clean-up. I mean, you're talking quite a few million. There could be some 1,300 or 1,400 tonnes of oil there.
What's your fear if that was to release into the Gulf?
If that ship suddenly did do a big breach and a lot of oil, we don't really have the facilities here to do a clean-up of that volume of oil. And they would have to get equipment from Australia probably to come across. And that's going to take time. In the meantime, if there's a lot of oil floating around out there and coming ashore, it would do a lot of damage.
The problem is no one knows for sure what we're dealing with. So far, there have only been visual surveys of the wreckage, when what is really needed is an investigative probe to drill into the oil bunkers to see what's in there.
We do need to get Maritime New Zealand under the water and doing the survey for us so we know exactly what we're dealing with.
Maritime New Zealand has known about the risk of an oil spill for decades and said in 2000, if a major structural change occurred, the oil could easily come to the surface en masse. However, they also said it was unlikely that the bulk of the remaining oil would be released at one time, and that the more likely scenario is occasional reports of small amounts of oil.
So how likely is it that there will be a big oil spill?
It's hard to say. There's different debate on it. But, you know, a lot of people say, oh, if it happens, you know, but we say, well, it's not if, it's when. They used to call it the Titanic of the Pacific while it was being built.
Keith Gordon is just one party who has reported concerns to Maritime New Zealand. In 2019 and again in 2020, Maritime New Zealand requested funding from the government for further investigation of the wreck, but both requests were declined.
It's far cheaper to get that oil out now than the cost to clean up later. Either way, it's going to cost money. the major thing first is to get an assessment survey done.
And that would fall to the Minister in charge, Matt Ducey. What would you say to him?
Well, yeah, see if you can find the money, Matt. It's out there, and it's not going away.
We did go to Associate Minister for Transport, Matt Ducey, and he told the Hui the government has no plans to commission any further survey work. He said they would rely on partial visual surveys done by the Royal New Zealand Navy in 2021 and 2022.
Each successive government has known about this, and each successive government has not done the work that needs to be done. What I want to say to our government is the clock will soon stop.
As I've said before, it's not if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen.
Aratiri Poatara. Now, Maritime New Zealand says it has recommended surveying the Niagara, but it has not been funded to undertake the work. It has investigated reports of surface oil over the years. Maritime New Zealand says natural processes will break down surface oil over time, and it has no reports of wildlife or the shoreline being affected. Akati ki utunu mai e te iwi, stay with the Hui 20 years on from the seabed and foreshore Hīkoi. Hone Harawira joins us to reflect on that Hīkoi and the lessons potentially to be learned as a result. O ki mai anō e ngā iwi, nā ngā tumanako te kōrero haruru tapu wā e kāea. The foreshore and seabed Hīkoi started a new political movement and shaped a generation of Māori advocacy that continues today. But given the current political climate, what does one of its architects think of Hīkoi now and the lessons learned from that Hīkoi 20 years ago? Hone Harawira is with us in studio now. E kara, e hone tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe, Jules.
Hoki mai. Always good to have you. Remind us, Hone, why the decision for a Hīkoi 20 years ago?
Māoridom, right across the board, was pissed off with the government's decision to ignore legal process and to simply steal the foreshore and seabed unto themselves. There was talk about all kinds of action, and then we heard, I think, Kahungunu first put out a call that they're going to mobilise, they're going to march. And then we heard about Te Arawa, we're going to do it. And then as the talk of a Hīkoi built up, all eyes turned to the north, obviously, because if you're going to march, that's where you march from, and I'm up home trying to hide. It became clear that wasn't going to happen, so yeah. Once it became clear to us at home too, that that's what we had to do, it was then a case of simply working out with activists up and down the country. If we come, we'll carry it. You organise through your town and we'll be there.
What was that like for you, though, when all those eyes turned towards you? Because I remember at the time, it was your name that was being mentioned.
Sure. Well, case of having to be, I was the one at home. I was part of that whole movement, so I wasn't fussed about it. It was just something that we had to do. I just made sure I had my ducks lined up. You right with this, Hilda?
Got to check with the
check with the boss. And then talking to the brothers, Pau and Mangu, Mike Smith, Brother Arthur, Rangitane, Marsden, Patu Hakarai, and others. at home, and the strength was there, so we decided connect with the rest of the country, and if it's on, it's on.
Did you realise how big it was going to be? How many... And by the way, not just Māori, non-Māori were going to participate, because I know you said you weren't worried too much about how many people turned up initially.
Well, I was. I think when Shane Todima interviewed me, and he said, how many will there be? I said, well, if it's just me and Hilda and Mangu, I'll be a bit disappointed, but if it's more than a couple of hundred, I'll be happy. Yeah. On the first day, when all of those kaumātua and queer turned up, though, including Sir Graham, and all the others, come up on the buses, I thought to myself, I've never seen that before. Actually, even the Land March didn't start with that level of support. I thought, wow, everybody's here. Everybody is here. The mokopunas were all there, so that gave a clear lift to the soul. We knew then that we were right. That was on the very first day, so it was just a case of managing it through, making sure activists all the way down the country understood where we were coming, the size of the movement, etc., etc., etc.
What was it like to be... look, the statements made by the Prime Minister, Helen Clark, at the time, haters and wreckers, the same old faces, mentioning your whānau by name.
Apart from the family thing, the fact that she could meet that with that bloody sheep a couple of days before, and then ignore the tens of thousands of Māori travelling to Wellington, really exposed that the racism within her. She's seen as being a really good, really strong leader, and she was, and a very clear leader, but at that point, she made it clear, and by her decision-making process, she didn't ask the Māori MPs. It was her, Margaret Wilson, I think Minister of Justice, Michael Cullen, and Heather Simpson, her number 2. They were the ones who made the decision. No discussion whatsoever with Māori, who own Māori MPs, and then simply told them what was going to happen. So from that point on, it was clear that that was not a leader that Māori wanted to follow.
And we know, obviously, throughout that time that Tariana Turia goes through a process and she ends up leaving, and of course the Māori Party is formed. But many of the Māori Labour MPs at the time stayed. John Tamere has said the easiest, and quote, the easy thing to do would have been to walk.
No, it wasn't easy for Tari. It was the hardest thing to do. Really, the thing John needs to understand, it was the right thing to do would have been to walk. It was desperately hard on Tari. I know what she went through, heard about it afterwards. I knew about it at the time. She was under huge pressure. Just one Māori woman opposing the whole of government on an issue like this. So she did the hard thing, but she did the right thing. The difficulty is the boys didn't have the balls to follow her, and probably were a bit embarrassed that it was a woman leading, so they couldn't understand how they should follow her. So they followed the white Pākehā lady instead. And it was the wrong thing to do. Not about being insulting to them necessarily. I think they know it was the right thing to do. Not the easy thing, the right thing.
We are in an interesting political climate at the moment, and calls have been going for Hīkoi.
Sure.
And of course we have a hui āmotu on the 31st of May at Ngāti Kahungunu. Could a Hīkoi today happen in the way that it happened 20 years ago? Could it achieve the results that were achieved 20 years ago with the Hīkoi that you led, given, as we know now, the Māori Party has most, in fact, bar one, all the Māori seats in Parliament at the moment?
When I get asked about it, I say, particularly to all of the younger ones, well, are you? Are you going to march? Are you going to organise it? You know where we are. You know we'll always support what it is that you do. But toi tū te tiriti, that movement, that group of, and they're national now, of younger ones, they have to make that call, because they're the ones who are going to be leading it. Just like we led it in our time. They're the ones who have to step up and say, we are, and this is why, and this is how, and this is the kaupapa.
Has Aotearoa as a nation learned anything from what happened with the Hīkoi 20 years ago? Because we know now, as a result of the Hīkoi, that Māori will collaborate, collectivise, come together on key issues. But has New Zealand as a country learned anything from what happened 20 years ago, do you think?
I really don't care whether New Zealander has, whether New Zealand has. I care, though, that we as Māori need to decide, and again, it's an activist thing, and the younger generation have to provide that lead. If it's going to happen, all of you out there, get it done. Don't sit around waiting and asking and then get till next Christmas and say, oh, we should have. Either you are or you're not.
Can you understand, though, that they may want to come and seek advice from people like you?
Sure.
And get the kupu.
And my advice is absolutely, you make the call. Whatever that call's going to be, you guys make the call. And know that we will support that call, whatever it's going to be. You know, whether it's to march, whether it's to organise flights down there, whether it's to organise, I don't care what it is, what the process is, but they have to step forward and take that leadership so that, in the same way that Ihumātao was a follow-on from what happened at Bastion Point, and, you know, gave that generation a sense of how to occupy land to make a statement. If this generation wants to make it a hīkoi, ka pai, we'll back them. Whatever they decide, it's up to them. All I say is, come on, guys, don't wait until it's Christmas.
Hone, thank you. Thank you for those recollections. 20 years ago, it feels like yesterday, and you've held your form. Some of us need a bit of makeup. Thank you. There, after the break, from waka world champion to aspiring Olympic athlete, Casey Ngātaki, and his Olympic dream is next. E harei te hui toranga pua nahe he hui hakina kina. Ngāti Tamāho paddler Casey Ngātaki has spent most of his life on water. From waka he switched to the Olympic discipline of canoe sprinting. And he wants other waka paddlers to take the plunge to try and make their Olympic dreams come true. Mea nei te purongo, John Boynton.
The steely black waters of Lake Karapiro. Waters which make or break Olympic and world champions. Casey Ngātaki is embracing the challenge.
Being in this environment and surrounded by the best in the country, I'm just drawing in as much as I can.
The 22-year-old Ngāti Tamāho Uri is a canoe racer, the equivalent to being a sprinter on the water. He's on a journey to try and make it to the top.
It's taken me 3 years to get into this space. It's just about turning up every day.
Turning up actually means countless hours of intense training.
There we go, Case. Keeping the shoulders down and relax.
Today he's in a morning session with his coach, Craig Mustard.
That's good paddling. Beautiful.
Casey's already clocked up 17 kilometres on the water.
There's a lot of other people that deserve to be here too. So just kind of using this to learn as much as I can.
Also on board is a special guest.
What's it like having your mum here today?
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I love it a lot. Yeah, it means a lot.
At the end of the yellow, boys, we'll turn around.
His mum, Hinekura Ngātaki, is one of Casey's biggest supporters.
To come here and see him today, the mahi he does on water but also off water, yeah, it's lovely to see that.
Casey's journey to canoeing started with waka ama.
Do you remember the first time you were on the water?
I was maybe 5 or 6 on my grandmother's old canoe.
Casey grew up on the water, here on the Tāmaki River in Auckland.
I just got so many memories here, especially when I was a young teenager and training really, really hard. Just felt at home on the water. I always love coming back here, just to reconnect and touch base.
The sport gave a rangatahi like himself a positive outlet.
I grew up in Linden, Manureo. This was kind of my thing when I was a teenager, and I wouldn't say it kept me out of trouble, but it was just something that I could just focus all my energy on.
In 2022, he became the first Māori to win the men's 500 metres race at the Waka Ama World Sprint Champs. Waka Ama is one of the fastest growing water sports in Aotearoa. It is a pathway for talented paddlers to get into the Olympic sport of canoe racing.
In Waka Ama, we've got a lot of athletes and a lot of talent, and if they can come over to the sport and go to the Olympics and World Champs, then that'd be great.
From Waka Ama to canoe racing, Casey has shifted his focus.
Just being a professional athlete is awesome.
He's moved to Cambridge to live and train full-time and is supported by High Performance New Zealand.
Athletes do get support, but compared to if you're working full-time, it's definitely not like that. It was never about finances for me. This is just enjoying what I love.
But it's also tough.
How competitive is it?
Oh, very competitive. You always need to be on your toes.
When he needs inspiration, he turns to Ngāti Porou and Te Aitanga a Māhaki, Olympic legend Lisa Carrington.
Lisa Carrington taking it out straight away to the lead, as she often does.
She's won 5 Olympic gold medals in canoe sprint.
She's real cool. I was lucky that when I first started, she helped me out with some training sessions. No, she's a great role model.
Qualifying for his first Olympics this year in Paris isn't guaranteed, but his whānau believe he has a long career ahead.
We're proud of Casey and his achievements. Watching him grow on water through waka ama and then into canoeing. It's lovely to see a young man doing what he does on the water and just loving it.
Right now, just taking it one day at a time, and I know there'll be a lot of ups and downs, but stay consistent, stay resilient.
Are you living a dream?
Yeah, not a lot of people can do what they love every morning or every day. I'm just giving the sport a go, so maybe this might encourage other young Māori to try it. Yeah, that's a big thing for me.
Mahi tikana, kia kahe hoa. Hei te wiki e tu mai nei e te iwi coming up next week on The Hui.
How old were you when you committed your first crime?
13.
Turning up the heat on Ram Raiders.
Well, I don't think you can call them anything else but criminals. It's criminal behaviour.
Convicting our kids.
Why do you think you did those things?
We really didn't have enough money.
We're going to create youth offender military academies.
I don't agree at all that it's going to work.
Walking this way, please, to your station.
Is there a better way?
That's perfect.
I'm an example of being able to change.
Rangatahi behind the reins have their say.
We are your future, regardless of where you're in jail or not. We are still your future. We are your statistics.
It's wrong. You're criminalising children.
Look out for The Hui on all the usual social media platforms. We're also on YouTube and on Newshub's website. Kia mau ki te tūranga o taputapu a te iwi haumi e hui e taiki e.